all day today. I
Good.
deserve it.
You do. Good for you.
Yes.
We are live in 10 seconds. And we're live. So it is now 5 o'clock. We'll wait one more minute. Okay, we have a quorum. I know that there will be a couple of others joining us shortly, so we should have pretty full attendance. This afternoon, I will call the March meeting of the Charlottesville Tree Commission to order. I'm surprised there aren't more of you outside, like Jody, enjoying the beautiful weather. I hope you've been able to take advantage of it and go out for a walk or just, I heard my first spring peepers last week. I'm sure some of you have heard them as well, and they actually lighten the heart more this year than ever to hear them. I'm always reminded of the venerable naturalist Joseph Wood Crutch. The first time he heard the spring peepers one year, he said, "Don't forget, we're all in this together." And I think that applies more this year than ever. So thank you for taking time out of this beautiful day, at least the next hour and a half before it gets dark. We have a very full agenda this evening, as you can see. We're also pleased to have a staff presentation, plenty of committee reports. And so I'm going to jump right into this and pull up the February minutes, which you've all had a chance to review in the packet. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions, amendments, anything to the February minutes? I don't see any. Is there a motion to approve the February minutes? Somebody wave at me. Peggy waved. The second. Jody seconds. All in favor? 5. February minutes are approved. Wanted to update you on 2 things before we go into the rest of our agenda for this afternoon. First is the CIP request update. It's been 5 weeks since we last met. In that period of time, Peggy did, of course, we made our presentation to council in January, and then Peggy did go and represent us at the meeting, I believe it was February 12th. I can't recall. Anyway, Joint Planning Commission and City Council. So Peggy, do you want to just give a quick update on that so everybody's on board?
Well, originally, I think you knew we had asked $75,000 for new tree planting and an amount, I think it was 50 for ash trees. It became apparent that we probably weren't going to get both. And so we decided to emphasize the tree planting and said that, you know, by next year, we'd have more solid data about the cost of removing so many ash trees. But I did let them know it's a dire situation. Every ash tree in the city is going to die unless it's been treated. And so far as we know, maybe Mike can confirm it, the $75,000 is still in the CIP. I think I saw it the other day. So that's good news.
I
I think,
Planning Commission actually suggested to council that they increase the tree treat the funds requested for planting more trees.
Hmm.
You were
Yeah.
there, right?
Above the 75?
Well, not to say it's going to happen, and I'd be surprised if city council agreed to it. But as I recall, Lyle Solo Yates suggested that more be put in, more be asked for than what the tree commission has requested. So we'll follow that.
well, I think,
Okay.
we've, again, this year made our case as best we can to council and to planning commission. One of the considerations was that pushing hard for the Emerald Ash Borer funds might actually rob Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, we
And
know
taking-
that was
taking-
made. That was made clear to everybody on the planning commission, and very clear.
Yep.
But still, Lyle recommended, and it was approved by planning commission to recommend to city council they add another $50,000 into planting new trees.
No, we appreciate that, Jody. And, the
Well, I
other,
didn't do
well, we appreciate, well, you always advocate for us, so we appreciate that. And one of the calculations made, and Mike can speak to this a little, is obviously there's a possibility that we may need to remove some of those trees in the next fiscal year. So can you tell us, Mike, just briefly what the plan would be for that, since it looks like we won't have that money in the CIP?
Yeah, Todd and I, we're still exploring, all of our options. How are we going to, remove the worst trees, creating the biggest risks, and just how we can leverage funding there, which is unfortunate because you're just putting out fires here and there where you can, right? Instead of like a place like disc golf or some of these other parks where you have high concentrations of ash, you're coming in to deal with one, versus instead of coming in and dealing with the whole problem. So, but we're going to look at a few different things and see what, the best way to move forward.
And I think, as others have mentioned, for next year, we should develop a detailed report on this, and as detailed as we can in terms of numbers and costs, and pull everything together with a nice executive summary, but to just sort of crystallize this for everybody. I think we're moving in the right direction, but we certainly need to see a larger commitment of resources to that. So we have a year, but the year is going to go by quickly. Actually, we have less than a year. So thank you to everybody who worked on that and weighed in on that. The only other item I have before we get into the rest of the agenda is, as we've discussed previous meetings, we have terms that are ending at the end of March, and so the process, for those of you who, well, I think most of you have all gone through this, but the process is that it's done on a quarterly basis. So the city opened up applications for what are technically 3 positions whose terms end as of March 31st. Those applications were, period was from February 4th to, I think it was March 5th, last Friday, anyway. That period is closed. The applications have been received by clerk. Clerk received 8 applications. What we will do now is, as we did last year at this time, is prepare a memo for council making recommendations based on assessed needs for the commission. The needs that we have are essentially what we had last year, and particularly since one of the terms ending is Paul's, and he is not eligible to renew. So we made clear that we need, we really want a landscape architect. Not that we can replace Paul, but we are going to try to replace Paul with another landscape architect. Second, and not in any order, but second in importance for us is that we increase diversity on the commission. There was an effort made to reach out to a broader community to solicit applications to make sure that the commission, particularly as we go more and more into our work in environmental justice, that we actually reflect our community more than we do. And so that will be communicated in our recommendations to council based on our review of the applicants. And the third is just generally applicants with backgrounds, whether they be in trees, arborists, or horticulturalists, or naturalists, bring another skill set to the commission. And so we will make a recommendation as well. The two terms that end March 31st are Emily Cohn-Miller's term and Jeff Jennings' term. I'm not sure, Emily's not here, and I'm not sure if both have reapplied for their terms because they were serving shortened terms, but I can have that conversation on the side with Jeff afterwards. But council will submit a memo, and council will make appointments next week at next week's meeting. And then we had, after the deadline, Lynn Rush, who was serving the first of her second term of 3 years, has stepped off the commission. So we're already looking ahead to the next quarter, or to the June period. We'll always solicit more applications. We're happy for that. But since we did receive a goodly number of applications, I'm not sure if it's a record, but eight seemed to me like a fair number of applications. We will have people that we can go back to for filling Lynn's term, and that would be a 2-year term, which would end in 23. So that is to update you on those matters. Are there any questions about any of that? If not, we're rather on schedule. So we're pleased this afternoon to have a staff presentation from Lucy Hartley, who's a program specialist in Parks and Recreation, working on education programs. She'll tell us a little bit more about herself and her tenure here. Lucy had reached out to us, and so we're very happy to welcome her and to listen to what she has to tell us. So it's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much for having me today. And it's great to see all of you. And I look forward to learning more about the work that you do. So I'm Lucy Hartley. I work for Parks and Rec, and I've been around for just over a year. So in some ways, I'm a little new. I was on the job for 3 months when we shut everything down, and I've been working from home. So some things I'm still learning about. But in non-COVID times, I'm based at Carver Recreation Center, and I work with my colleague Kate Burnell also in programs, and we put on everything from art classes, gymnastics, dance, all of those kinds of rec center programs, but we also have an outdoor program. And in the past, we've done things like mountain biking camp, kayaking, some of those outdoor rec, but also some nature programs. And when COVID came, we decided, since the rec center was closed, we moved our programs outside. So my background, I'm a park naturalist. I worked for Montgomery County Parks in Maryland for about 10 years. So I decided I would teach nature programs, so that's what I do. And we didn't have any, our instructors, unfortunately, were laid off during COVID. We're hoping to start hiring some of them back soon. But so, Kate and I stepped in and did programs, and we've had a really good response. And I think people really want outdoor programs, and some of them were like young kids exploring outdoors to going to different parks with kids, doing hikes. And that was after school programs. And then winter came, and it was a little harder to do after school programs. It's dark and cold by that time in the day. So we started looking around for something we could do, families could do on their own. And we came up with it's called the Landmark Tree Photo Safari. And I think that's when Peggy saw that, and we made some connections about some of the outreach that we were doing and work on trees. So we took advantage of the wonderful website, the Charlottesville Area Tree Stewards and their landmark trees, turned it into a scavenger hunt using iNaturalist app, where you can go around, you take pictures of 7 different trees and give us your iNaturalist name, and we can see that you did that. And we had grand prize drawing on March 1st. The winner got a hammock so they can keep enjoying trees. So that was just a fun thing we did for families that folks could do on their own. So right now we're just, we very much want to continue nature programming and environmental education. And I've met with, Kate and I met with Todd and Vic and just talking about what kind of work is happening in this area right now, who could we partner with, what can we offer? So I think we're very much having that conversation and exploring, and this is a great time for us to be reaching out and making connections with other groups. And if you all ever want to come, we have summer camps and we would love to have someone come talk about trees. So if that's something that's up your alley, or folks, that's another need we have as well. So I'd love to hear about some of the work that you all do, or any connections that what you're thinking about in terms of education and outreach. And any questions you have for me?
We did restructure the commission, I think it was 2 years ago, to create an education and advocacy committee.
Right.
And there's a lot that falls in their purview. There is a strong desire, and I'll let others speak to this, for education. There's a strong connection we've had with the tree stewards. We know the tree stewards, and Mark Zollenhofer, who represents them, has spoken about education. We're looking towards Arbor Day and ways to integrate with the schools. And so you've come to the right place, because we're not shy talking about trees. Paul was the first one to put up his hand, but he's not the only one. So I'll let Peggy jump in.
Okay.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And first thing I'm going to do is I just got an email from Heather Hill, one of the city council members, who Dominion had reached out to her about a project. I don't know if you know what it's called. It's called Plant It. It's about, it's a free educational program to teach kids about the value of trees.
Great.
And they're wanting to do something. The Dominion fellow, Felix, I can't remember his last name, reached out to Heather and someone in the schools.
Okay.
So as you talked, I was thinking, I just mentioned it to Brian just quickly. He said, well, another project. So
Right.
I'd like to talk to you about that. And I'll also, and you'll hear if you can stay about what's going to happen on Arbor Day, and you might be able to have some ideas on that too.
Okay, great. And yeah, we are running summer camps at the city schools this summer, and we can't do field trips. So we're very much wanting to find things for kids to do in the schoolyard, or bring people in just to keep it more interesting.
Really like to hear more about what you did with iNaturalist. I love that app. It's a great tool for doing data science. And when we start talking about trying to find the ash trees and how that's going to be impactful in the future, we have no idea where they are, right?
Okay.
Where a tiny fraction of ash trees are locally, and good data would be an incredible resource.
Okay.
Love to know about that, and how did you integrate that? How did you how did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the idea, because we noticed other Parks and Rec organizations are doing these high-tech scavenger hunts using different online tools. And part of my incentive is I wanted to get people familiar with iNaturalist, because we also, I forgot to mention, the City Nature Challenge, which is a BioBlitz end of April. That happens, the Nature Conservancy is coordinating, and they reached out to us. So I'm going to lead a BioBlitz at one of the parks. Chris Genzik, our trail person, is doing volunteer work. But yeah, I mean, that would be an opportune time if we wanted to focus on ash trees, or do a separate workshop and get some people trained on it and out there and looking. So yeah, I enjoy using the app. They like you to prefer something that's wild, but you can mark on there if it's a planted tree, just put cultivar. And but yeah, it is a great tool for that kind of data collection.
And the BioBlitz, will that be for anybody, or is that?
Yeah, it's open to the community, and there are different events around it, but anybody can go out, and they just have a very focused collection, and you can do it within iNaturalist. There's a City Nature Challenge page that's specific to Charlottesville. And then they have people who are identifying things after that and just kind of synthesizing all of that data.
Sounds like something good to talk about at Arbor Day.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Another opportunity, as we're working towards, it's a longer term project, given that we're still semi-lockdown, but working towards planting more in low-income neighborhoods, and education is a component of it,
Mm-hmm.
clearly. And we all agree that it's a very important part, not just, I mean, for everybody in the community, but for young people. So
Okay.
I could see that as a, I mean, that's a little ways off, but that certainly would be something we could follow for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've
Other thoughts from the commission? I think these are good places to start our conversation.
Curious how many items, so they were just going through the existing objects and finding the trees, or were they adding content? Or sorry, I love iNaturalist. I think it's really
for the photo safari.
Mhm.
That was more of a, just documenting that you went around the city and found these trees.
how
So
much training did that take?
we just explained it we just had a website, and this is how you do it. And it's pretty simple steps, and people seem to figure it out.
No, I mean
They
that's
take their
great.
kids with them. Their kids explain it, right?
I know everything sounds easy until you do it in practice.
Yeah, I know. There's always a glitch, but
No, that's congratulations.
yeah.
I know that, have you met Devin Floyd yet in town? He's with the
Yeah, I
Center for
do
Urban.
know Devin.
Okay. Anyway, we used to do some fun things where we take kids to, go look for peepers, kind of just have them sit real quietly when the peepers come out, and then just,
Right.
they're just next to you, you just pick them up.
Mhm.
Anyway, he always had lots of fun plans for kids and wandering activities and stuff. Anyway,
Great.
I'm sure you have lots of ideas already.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a good source for them.
Yeah, good idea.
I could chime in that this is sort of really more of a curriculum development thing, but I taught a 3rd grade class years ago at Burnley Moran,
Hmm.
where we actually were able to obtain the landscape plans for the school. I think
Oh.
actually Peggy's firm had developed at some point.
Mhm.
And what I noticed with the 3rd graders was that they were really interested in the trees and identifying them based on the leaves, but they also sort of enjoyed the mapping exercise. And I've always wanted to sort of turn that into something that kind of lives at a school. Like every school should have a map of their own school, and their map of the playground with the trees on it, so that
Mhm.
when the kids go out for recess, they can make friends with the oak tree and the pine tree and know where they are. And somehow, I mean, there are multiple levels of learning when it comes to tree identification and understanding landscapes. And I suppose it's possible if Parks and Rec sort of held camps at schools that
Mhm.
that kind of mapping and tree ID is a kind of ongoing event might be developed. It's always hard to know where you store the maps and who keeps them. And in my case, it was a particularly gifted teacher, and I don't know how many other years she did the same thing, but it was just something I developed that you might want to try.
Okay. Yeah. And we definitely want to use the schoolyard as a classroom this summer. It's one of the, if you get them outside as much as we can. Unfortunately, there are a lot of their gardens, the city schoolyard garden, and a lot of the schoolyards, and other ways to connect with plant life. But yeah, definitely trees. And I did a program with the master naturalist in the fall, and they were doing an exercise with these kids calculating the height of trees. And the kids were so into it. I was like, I don't know if they're going to go for this, but they had to do pi and calculations, and they were just running around tree to tree, figuring out, how tall the trees were. So that was a lot of fun.
Be fun to work with educators and figure out what's appropriate for each grade level.
Mm-hmm.
3rd graders couldn't do trig, but the 7th grader.
Right. Yeah, it's a good way to incorporate some math and other things.
Mark, I just wanted to mention the Burley Moran Playground Project. I actually did the landscape architecture school, and I had 2 elementary school kids who actually came up with the ideas and did a lot of the drawing around the edges. So I won the contest, not because of me, but because of my 2 elementary school kids. And we did the play trail that's still there.
Oh, great.
That's great.
Yeah.
And these days, education like this has a multiplier effect. It doesn't just please the kids, but it delights the parents when they're outside.
Right.
So it's great. We have, we really, as you can see, we're going to have plenty of things we can work on together. I see Jody's hand just went up.
Okay.
Just a quick question for Lucy. have you been in communication or done anything with Camp Holiday Trails?
I think Chris with the Through the Trails is in touch with them. Yeah, I mean I've definitely had my eye on that place because I know they have kids out there. I don't know who exactly they're rented out during the school year, and I think they have an interest in building a nature center one day. And I mean that's such an ideal place to get kids
Very,
out. So
very much so. And
yeah.
I mean, it's an 80 acre site, and
Mhm.
it's close to Charlottesville, but yet you get out there and you feel like
Oh yeah.
you know, hundreds of miles away.
Mhm.
And they did have to cancel camps this past year, but they're
Mhm.
talking about doing day camps this summer and starting up again. So I will send a note. I do volunteer work out there, and I'll send a note to Tina LaRoche, the director, and just it'd be great to have some sort of connection and working back and forth, and they'd be a great resource for you in terms of some place to take the kids, and
Right.
yeah, that could
Yeah,
work out
that's
well.
great. Yeah, it's a great property. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other comments or questions?
No, just that over, I mean, honestly, like with the data science side, if you find a need for that or an interest in that, I know it's not for every age group, but the folks over at Code for Seville would probably support this kind of work.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
they would have some technical folks on the team that would get excited about this pretty quickly.
Okay. Good idea. Thanks.
Well, thank you for being with us. It's
Sure.
good to meet you, and we look forward to working with you going forward.
Yeah, thank you.
So we will move now to committee reports. And we have a lot in committee reports. We'll start with education and advocacy. And Peggy will speak especially about the work that's been done in the last month on low canopy neighborhoods.
Well, Lucy, I just thought we've got another project for you, so don't go away. Stay on the line. Okay. So,
I do have to hop off in a little bit, but I'll stay for a
okay,
while.
okay. I'll get back to you, don't worry. Well, I think you probably know, or all of us know, one of our priorities are plant trees in these low canopy areas and neighborhoods in the city. And so we're zeroing in on those areas. And we sort of have 3 projects, or maybe even, no, 3, that we're looking forward to. So one is 10th and Page area, and we're partnering with CATS and also the City of Promise. And CATS, it's going to be 2 phases. CATS actually has gotten some money to do a first phase that would happen in this fall to do a small tree planting, less than 5 to 10 trees, but they would couple it with a celebration with the City of Promise. The City of Promise has done a reading tree, which is really kind of neat. It's not an actual tree, but on their porch, they've made this, or they're going to make this tree. And then when the kids read a book, they'll put a ribbon on the tree. So CATS is going to actually want to plant an actual tree, probably with a bench somewhere that they can also continue this celebration. And they would plant some trees at the same time, have food, and have a free book giveaway too. So, and that would sort of be an introduction to a longer range project and we want to be involved in the short range one, and the longer range project, we're working on a plan for that, but it unfortunately can't really happen until 2022. We have 2 organizations that we think are going to give us a grant, one in particular, and but we won't get the money until, we wouldn't get money until the end of the year. But we could do some planning. Again, we want to plant more trees in 10th and Page. We also want to do outreach on education, not just about trees, but the environment, and also to interest the teenagers. We want to talk about the green industry and the possibility for jobs, not just tree related, but environmental related, parks or whatnot. So I think it would be a time for, I hope you can, it seems like that's the kind of thing you do, and we'll get our act together and talk to you about that. But that won't happen till 22. The other area we're looking at was Franklin Street. That's in Belmont. And it's a very low canopy street. And the reason we're looking at that is the city is doing a sidewalk, and a neighbor along the street had reached out to Brian and I over the last year a number of times about wanting trees, hopefully could plant trees after the sidewalk was done. Unfortunately, that too, we thought the sidewalk was going to be done this summer, but somehow something happened with the grant from the CBDG, and that won't happen till next summer. But we're working, Robin Haynes and our group are working with them, and we hope to get some trees planted again. That won't happen till the fall of 22. And the third, because we're not going to be able to plant as much as we like in the low canopy areas, but we have talked about perhaps going back to some of the public housing sites that we looked at before. And one in particular is on Mickey Drive. It's an area that, and again, we could use city money there because it's a public property. I talked with Betsy Rodinger today, who's head of the Charlottesville Redevelopment Housing Authority. And she's is very interested in the project and will help us to work with the community there to get them involved. And Paul knows all about this project because we had looked at it one time before, but it seems like a possibility, but we will work really close with the people there, and hopefully maybe we can do some plantings there this fall. So those are the.
And for the record, it's not public property. I saw Mike's eyebrows go up there. It's CRHA's property, but there's an MOU that we could plant on their land, agreement with the city and CRHA property. So just.
Oh, okay.
Got you covered, Mike.
Okay.
I mean, but we did try this a few years ago, if you recall, and it was not well received by the community.
Right.
And one of the follow-up discussions we had with FAR was how they would be willing to do it at Mickey Drive if Mickey Drive led the planting. You know, it wasn't the tree commission leading the planting effort. It was sort of them determining where they want trees, if they're interested in trees, and sort of us just helping facilitate that as a liaison. And last time it was more us knocking on doors, asking people if they wanted a tree, and I think some members of the community felt like they weren't, in particular one member of the community felt like they weren't totally involved in the process. So I think if we work a little closer with FAR, it could work, especially on a smaller site. West Haven's a bit more complicated than Mickey Drive. So anyway, I think there is still promise for this, and I'm glad to hear that FAR is still interested.
Yeah, that this initiative, which the commission has been talking about for a while, especially the past year in terms of environmental justice and social justice, and it's a long-term effort. And it's not something that we can just do and we can just, walk in and say we're going to do something. I mean, education, which we've been talking about, education is as much about listening as it is about telling. And we know that that's an important part. So building a coalition to do this work and showing our commitment, and by that I mean not just the city, but also outside private organizations, is the first step. But including, and in an important way, including those in any of these project areas is critical. And again, that requires that we listen to their needs and we listen to their concerns. And I speak for the commission that we're committed to doing that. That's an important part, because none of these projects really in the end will succeed unless we have that element. So. You have anything? I want to thank Peggy, by the way, Peggy and Roxanne. A whole bunch of people are working behind the scenes on this, building alliances and bridges and turning over stones, looking for possible funding. So I feel really good that we're taking advantage of the time where we really can't plant to do all of this work, which is, as we know, the planning is always the important part. The execution is great, but the planning has to be there. So. I want to add just that I did attend the webinar that I notified you all about last week. The monthly U.S. Forest Service webinar was today. And the title was, it was a long title, but it was about tree equity. And it was fascinating. I thought afterwards that Anson should should have been there listening with me. You can go pick it up online. It's at their website, because there is a tool that is being rolled out, which was previewed by the American Forests. Was it American Forest Association? I guess one of the oldest green organizations in the country. Has been working for some years with the University of Vermont, and they've created this tool called the Tree Equity Score Analyzer tool. And it goes live nationwide in May. It's an extraordinary thing, extraordinary amount of data. I was just blown away looking at this. We were also joined by officials from Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management and a tree planting organization in the city of Providence. And they have used, the developers of this tool, American Forest and University of Vermont, have worked with them to take the basic level of data which they have, which is extensive data. I mean, they've tapped data from practically every federal government department, and they've layered this data on. But what they did first, and that's going to be available to all urban areas, and we're included in it. They went into Rhode Island and they spent the past year and they've added extra layers of specific community data to create an even more powerful tool. And maybe I'm easily impressed, but I was really impressed and very excited that come May, we will actually have access to the sort of the baseline data tool. And then we can decide at that point if we want to, they're going to be swamped with a lot of communities going to want to work with them. Now that they've done the beta in Rhode Island, a lot of communities are going to want to do more extensive. But it's definitely something that we need to be tapped into, because again, it was just it looks like an extraordinary tool. And so you'll be hearing
Brian, I may have missed it, but what does this tool do for us?
So what they've done is they've taken a whole bunch of, first of all, they've taken all the tree, they've taken the satellite and all that imagery for the country, and that's sort of the baseline. So it's looking at tree canopy. So they're looking at places to plant. And then they've layered into that a whole bunch of other data, which includes, plat maps. And I mean, it's right down to neighborhoods, and they can actually zero in on properties. It's not just like, it's that sort of specific.
And Jeff put a link to it in the chat as well, Jody, which you can look at, but it also it really gives you a grade for your city of how equitable your canopy is. I mean, I think it gives you an opportunity to compare your city to other cities and say, oh, we are doing great, or we are really, we got some work to do. So
by equitable, they're comparing the tree planting in different neighborhoods, different socioeconomic neighborhoods.
So yes,
assessments about the equity, the level of equity.
Yes. So at a basic level, no surprise, this tool shows what we all know and have seen again and again and again in terms about the inequitable distribution of trees for all sorts of historical and other reasons. The basic tool does that. And if you go to the website, though, I don't believe they have the tool up yet, because it's not going to be rolled out until May. So you'll get to learn a bit about it, but you can't play around with it. You can sign up for an app, but I don't think the app is much more than a demonstration. And again, I'm not great at explaining these things, but then the next level is when they're going to communities, as they've done across the state of Rhode Island. And now one of their next projects is to work in Richmond. Not a surprise, because Richmond sort of has been highlighted and spotlighted on this very issue. They're going to Richmond next. They then go in and they layer on all sorts of other data, unemployment data, income data, age data, healthcare statistics. I mean, it's an enormous amount of data. And there they have a whole bunch of little sliding scales where you can not just look at a static score, but you can decide, like, okay, well, what are the indicators we're looking for to determine like where our priorities are to plant? It might be a mixture of things like opportunities to plant, because there's a lot of space to plant. It could also be that these are places with poor health indicators. And so you can, as they were sliding these little bars around, and I'm not very good at describing this, you could see the scores vary. And so it's a data-rich tool, but the application, and again, I'm talking about the next stage, not the one that they're going to roll out. The application that they're already using in Rhode Island is pretty extraordinary. You can pinpoint, and they literally go down to properties, right down to the level. Each plat is defined as, you can sort. You can say what's government property, what's public property, and what's private property. It's extraordinary how you can. Now, for our purposes, it might actually be that there'd be too much data. And Anson's looking at me like it can't be too much data. But I think we really need to take advantage of this tool, especially as they roll it out in May and sort of incorporate it in our work. And we may find ways. I'm not sure if you need the American Forest and the University of Vermont to then, beef the thing up, or if we can say, okay, well, we've got some data that's unique that we want to actually add into the tool. So these are things we need to investigate. So it's another project for the commission and especially for Anson to work on from May. Anyway, I just wanted to add that since it happened just a few hours ago, and it obviously had me kind of excited. So I hope we can do something with that. Any questions for Peggy on her report? Hey, Peggy, do you have anything else for education advocacy? I think that covers. You're going to go into Arbor Day, so why don't you take Arbor Day?
All right, Lucy, you might be interested in this too. First, I have to apologize because last time we voted on looking at the ash tree behind the old library. And I had neglected, because I haven't done Arbor Day before, to talk to CATS about because we've always partnered with them and done a tree. So I had neglected to talk to them. And so they very politely called me and said, would you consider something else? Because we'd really like to get children involved. And put Mark in a bad spot, I'm afraid. And so they would rather do Walker School, where there are like 17 trees planted along the above the field at the entrance level of the school. And again, they want to make it an educational experience with the children. So Robin Haynes and Camille Wilson at CATS are really going to be the main ones to organize this. Robin is working on publicity, and Camille, who is a retired teacher, is going to work, and Paul was very nice to introduce us to the principal at Walker. He's very interested in it and has given us the name of a teacher there. And so Camille is going to be working with her to figure out some activities for the students to do. So our involvement, of course, we'll be involved. I mean, Brian needs to be there, and Mike, I don't know what, you usually, I think, contact the Department of Forestry. And so we'll need to do those, make sure Brian knows what to say and what you know what to say. Right. And the lucky thing too is the governor has opened up, now you can have 25 people outside meeting. So that's good. We'll be able to have people there plus children. And whether we do a Zoom event, I'm not sure. Along with that, Robin's going to talk with Brian Wheeler. But that's the plan. And so I hope that's okay. I had to sort of make Brian and I made an executive decision basically to say, yes, we'll work with CATS on this because, as I said, I'd sort of goofed. But I hope that's okay with everybody that we've changed the location.
So Peggy, it's a tree planting with the kids?
No,
The trees are already planted.
The trees are already planted. They were planted and there are 17 trees, 4 different species. And I think Camille's going to do something around the different species and whatnot. So it's actually a street tree planting, basically. So it'll be more than one tree. It'll be celebration of a number of trees.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this works really well. I mean, it ties into education. I mean, we had already talked about wanting to incorporate Walker. So I think this is a win-win. Mike?
Do they have a time? Are they planning to do an actual Arbor Day?
April 30th at 10 o'clock.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's 25 people right now, but we, I'll be hopeful. that number will go up, but 25 at least is better than 5. So I was,
Remind me of the day again.
April 30th at 10. That's what it is so far. We'll let you know,
Okay.
of course, beforehand and more details about what's going to happen.
Yeah, Walker is actually one of our summer campsites. So yeah, I'd definitely be interested in what activities they do that we could replicate maybe this summer.
yeah, we can make a very good day of that. Peggy, the other is there is a tree being recognized too.
Oh, that's right. Cats always recognize a, it's not, they don't call it a memorial tree. What, I can't remember
Notable.
what they call it.
Notable tree.
So,
I
A
guess.
notable tree.
Yeah, and it's going to be the post oak at Maplewood Cemetery. And Cats, a group, including Mark, were very kind to take a lot of the ivy off this tree, and apparently it was a big job. But it's also a tree that, as we talk further tonight, that will be in our nomination package for conservation under the tree conservation ordinance. So Robin is organizing that. That's something that Cats does. It will be done on the same day at a different time. And Robin, they always do this on Arbor Day.
so full agenda Arbor Day.
Great, sounds fun.
Yeah, you're all encouraged to definitely come out for both. Any questions about that? Anything to add? Peggy, Mike, all good?
That's it.
All right. So there may be a little bit more update when we meet, I guess, in a month. More detail.
We have
Sounds like
another meeting before.
Sounds like that's moving along really well. All right, so now we move, as Peggy alluded to a moment ago, we move into the nominees for tree conservation. Some of you may recall that we looked at these trees. It seems like yesterday. It also seems like 10 years ago. It was November of 19. And we voted on a number of trees. I believe it was either 7 or 8, may have been 7, to put forward. And Mike then went out and wrote his report. And then we got into the beginning of last year and everything came to a screeching halt. In the meantime, one of the issues that we had to resolve was that 2 of the trees, including the Burr post oak hybrid that's in Maplewood that Peggy was just mentioning, and another oak in Oakwood. The issue there was, could we nominate a tree in the cemetery? Because the tree conservation ordinance, although it had exceptions, made it pretty clear that you couldn't disturb the trees, do things that would be deleterious to the trees. So we had that issue to resolve. And then at some point, and I'm not sure, Peggy, if we had 1 or 2 sycamores from Riverview, and then one of them either died or no longer became worthy of nomination. I can't remember that.
Mike and I looked at the sycamore and decided that it really wasn't the one we had thought first. In fact, because the first sycamore we looked at, Robin Haynes had it as a notable tree. But I think since that time, it had a lot of deadwood and damage or just old age. So Mike and I found another sycamore along the trail that seemed to be a better specimen.
Thank you. So all said, that brings before the commission this evening, this package that took up most of the packet that we sent out of 6 trees, most of which we've already approved and voted on, but we are going to vote on them again tonight since there was so much change between November of 2019 and now. For the 2 trees in the cemetery, there is language in the code as an exception, section 1811, which says that the provisions of the article shall not apply to, quote, emergency work to protect life, limb, or property. And so we're going to interpret that, and it's written into Mike's report. And obviously the final decision on whether these trees are actually designated as council's decision. But we've interpreted that as to deal with the issue of the need to either inter somebody in a plot that would be within the critical root zone of one of these trees, particularly at Maplewood, because those of you who know the cemetery know the tree. It sits pretty much right at the center by the mausoleum. Having said that, I live right next door to Maplewood. There aren't a lot of burials, especially in that central part, but there might be the occasion where someone does need to be interred, or God forbid, disinterred. Stones that need to be maintained, stones that need to be moved. We've had damage just in the last year to a number of stones. So there are possibilities that some work would need to be done under the trees, and in some cases involving heavy equipment, in others, perhaps not. So we believe that that would be emergency work. It wouldn't be necessarily protecting life. It would be protecting whoever is already not alive, but it would definitely be protecting property and the trees. So there is also, and we didn't put this in the report, but there's also, and I'd like to take this up later, if not tonight at a future meeting. There's also language in section 7 of the code, city ordinance, that deals with the cemeteries themselves, and specifically the actual wording is right there in the ordinance for the plots. And so they are deeded as property, but that the city retains a pretty significant right, either through activity of its departments like Parks and Rec, or through ordinances or laws that council might pass to maintain, to manage, to improve the cemeteries. So there's flexibility on both sides. There's the ability to go in there and to do emergency work, but there's also the ability of the city to sort of make sure that nothing is done that would damage the trees. So it sort of goes both ways. I think the latter, the actual deed language, opens up the possibility that we might explore as a future project, particularly where we can actually reach out to those who own the plots. The issue, as we know, has come up before. Well, there are only so many places we can plant. As trees go down in Maplewood, and just in the past few years, we've lost several, including major trees, with one exception, which was by the road and sort of a street tree, but right on the margin of the road near Kelly, we were able to replace a very large cedar with an oak. But in most cases, when the trees go down, there's been this concern that we can't plant any more trees within the cemetery because of property rights and all that. So I think this deed language opens up the possibility, if for nothing else, then perhaps here and there replacing some trees with the understanding of plot owners. So that was sort of the bonus to looking into this issue for these trees. So you've had a chance to look at this packet. You've had a chance to look at Mike's reports. I'm going to open it up for any questions about any of these trees. Again, none of them should be surprises, but if anybody has questions or comments on these trees before we move forward.
I had just a clarification, Mike. I thought that these summaries are great. I actually really enjoyed reading all of them. I was wondering about how you evaluate the canopy, the live canopy, particularly the tree at Clark had a 45% rating. I'm kind of looking for it for the amount of canopy. Does that mean that like half of the live canopy is declining? And what does that metric refer to?
What we're looking at is the live crown ratio of the tree.
Live crown ratio, right?
So relative, so it's not, I mean, it could be considered deadwood or just where there's not branches. So a tree with more live crown ratio is better, it's more stable. You know, they generally can dampen more wind, they're usually healthier. So a tree with a more higher live crown ratio is always going to get a higher rating.
Is there a general percentage you're looking for, or does that vary by species?
Yeah, it will certainly vary by species, but like for instance, these trees, you know, they're open grown. You know, versus if you were looking at, say, a stand of pines in a forest, you're going to look at very different live crown ratios.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
It does. And it sort of makes sense that an elm tree, for example, might have these sort of larger branches with a lot of space between them. So it's not a cause for alarm. And in that case, you rated it as 45%, which is fair, but of course the condition of it, which was good. So that's what sort of led to my interest in that particular metric. But
And as trees age, they naturally entrench themselves by dropping off large limbs. So it's actually a natural part of the growing process for trees to have limbs die and fall off. So, you know, they don't all collapse at once. It's usually one limb at a time sort of thing as they get older. So anyway, it's a very normal process. When you see a very old tree with a low live crown ratio, it's pretty common.
right. That sounds right.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, quick
How is that
follow-up.
calculated?
It's more of just the generality, just sort of looking at the tree, just to give sort of an idea of, you know, it's based off of experience.
Shoot from the hip.
Yeah, it's not a very unscientific method.
A quick follow-up question about that American elm. I noticed that the report indicated it was due for a Dutch elm disease treatment in 2020. Do you know offhand if that happened on schedule?
Yes, it was done.
Great, thanks.
And you know, a sort of related question occurred to me too, is there any connection between our coverage, that these trees would be covered under the ordinance, and I would assume that the city's obligation to continue such treatments is further ensured by having a tree on this list or under this protection. But is there actually a connection?
No, I mean, we would anticipate treating these trees, you know, particularly the elm, regardless, just because, you know, the benefits it provides to the community, and the cost to treat it versus the cost to remove it. It's you know, definitely investment. So whether it was protected by ordinance or not, we would anticipate treating it in the future.
Right. So big trees are sort of on the schedule, and maybe somewhere out there, if funding is drying up, there start to be trees that were treated and are not, or do you continue to treat? I'm getting off topic here. I was just wondering about, you continue to treat trees that you've been treating, you know, and that makes up the, you know, these aren't going to drop off the list is the thing I was after, which.
No, I hope not, and it's not something we've ever had to do in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
Thanks.
I mean, it's not off topic, Mike, because Peggy has raised this issue a number of times.
Yeah.
In terms of if we're going to not just make the effort, but you know, do the work to nominate the trees, to have the city approve the trees, that that they have at least some elevated level of protection. And especially, because we'll talk about this in a minute, especially if we add more trees into this register, this list of trees, and it grows, there'd be a concern that some of the trees that we've identified, that assumes, of course, you know, using expertise and all that, that somewhere down the road, they're still worth preserving and treating. But you know, we'd have more of these trees, and so that makes it even more of an issue that we have, you know, let's just say 40 trees that we've gone through the process, and just want to make sure that these trees are getting, not to the detriment of other trees, but are getting treated a little better for the effort of doing this. And I think that's been Peggy's point all along.
I'll just pick up, I think, on that. I know, I mean, a couple of years ago, the tree commission, you know, got from city during the CIP process, $50,000 extra into the tree maintenance. And it was really for preservation of our important trees. And I know Mike has often talked about coming up with a formula to figure out which trees should be maintained. And obviously these trees we nominate would be, you know, on near the top of the list or at the top of the list. So I'm hoping, you know, just like Mike, like you did you came up with a great system of how we decide where to plant trees, that, you know, at some point we could work on a system of how we decide what are our best trees. But I noticed looking at the minutes last time that you still had money left in the maintenance budget. If the ash trees haven't taken it all, you know, maybe it's a chance to sort of look at these, I don't know what we'll have now, 17, 18 trees, to see if, you know, they need any work.
Yeah, it depends. Even from this list of trees, a lot of these have been pruned. A couple of them, I believe the elm was pruned last year. But a lot of these trees are, you know, they're maintained and they're pruned pretty regularly. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we can look at. And I think there needs to be, you know, a way to say we have money for pruning, you know, why does this tree get pruned versus this tree, right? You know, that's something that we need to work on.
Yeah.
And also, as trees get older, you know, if there are in a park-like setting, can we throw chips around the base of them, you know, to keep the turf off, you know, little strategies like that. Do you do that, Mike, at all?
We do that, you know, where we can. We understand, you know, what's best for the tree, but you know, we have all these parks where we have turf up to the trees, because the parks are used for so many different uses. So it's not feasible everywhere. You know, but we mulch trees where we can.
You do, just a caution, on Roanoke College where we were working one time, I won't say what tree company it was, but it's a well-known tree company. Anyway, they took off the turf, wasn't ours. They took off the turf under this huge tulip pop that had been growing in grass for almost ever because it was right on the lawn, and they killed the tree. So sometime I think you got to be careful about changing the micro environment of a tree. So, you know, I think you got to be cautious about that. That happened, Paul, I promise.
I believe you. I also know they're sensitive roots, so you could have killed off, you know, that's a tricky tree. But oaks and such, I mean, I think they really appreciate mulch under them. I mean, that's kind of a standard strategy for taking care of old trees, but
yeah.
We're literally getting into the weeds.
I know we are.
Okay.
Or grass.
Sorry, yeah.
Paul and I always get into the weeds.
I had one other question, and it was like the trees at Friendship Court. I noticed those are not in here. And is that sort of that was a discussion, but
yeah. So I'll update on that in a minute, because that was the package that we had moved forward in November was just the 7 or 8. We had talked about the others, but we had not gotten around to surveying them and writing up the reports, and so we'll discuss that as a next step. We haven't forgotten them. They're coming up. So if there are no other, Mark?
Yeah, is there a registry of those trees that's easily accessible to the public? I think it would be good if I would communicate that to Katz, because I know that Robin has a list of about 25 notable trees, which are something that she's developed. But if we have this registry of trees that are already approved for preservation, it might be good for the community to know about that.
they all exist on the city green prints map. So public utilities has them all mapped out on one website, which I can put into the links.
Is that maybe something that we could link on the actual tree commission page to make that a little bit more easily accessible?
I think we should consider it, Mike.
Yes, I don't see why not.
I mean, because our goal is to, you know, we had a bit of a stall the past year and a half, but our goal is to start putting more of these trees forward. So we want a place where people can easily access them, and Parks and Rec and linking through us is one. There could be other links, other places on the city website to these trees. And I think too, the fact that we have some background in the trees. I'm not saying we put the entire packet in there, but it should be informative. We've gone to the extent of researching these trees, writing them up as a report. Mike's done his report, so I think there's a lot of content that we could put there that would be helpful, and it certainly would be would add to future scavenger hunts in the city because we'd have the trees.
Paul, the green prints map, is that GIS accessible, or is that like a static?
I put it in the links and I apologize. It is GIS, the city green map, not green prints. Green prints is the other document. But if you go under resources, natural resources, you'll see the protected trees icon that shows up on that map. But that's all.
Gotcha. It would be cool. I don't know if it's the same one, but it would be cool to have that as a specific overlay in what like the kind of overall city GIS system where you're looking at parcel information and et cetera, et cetera. It would be cool to have that as a separate layer.
Think that's possible, Mike?
I personally don't have a problem with it. That'd be a question for our GIS people.
Because it's on the deed. I mean, it's on the deed of each of those properties, obviously. So.
Could I also recommend for us simpletons who don't use the computer much to put a link on the tree commission site for the recommended trees for the city? I went looking for that in the city website and it was easy. I couldn't find it. The first thing I went was to the tree commission site and couldn't find it there. So it was easier for me to go back through my old emails than it was to find it. So some of us don't know and really don't have the time to sit there and keep hunting and searching and I didn't know there was a natural resources site. I just go immediately to the ones that I feel like are the most direct way. Just a recommendation.
So you're saying to link this natural resources map to the tree commission page?
I think Jody was talking about the actual master tree list, which is on the urban forestry page for the city, but there's no link from the tree commission back to the urban forestry page that might have those documents. So is that correct, Jody?
Yes, that's correct, but even more obvious, just the recommended trees right there, a button for it right there on the tree commission site. Seems like a logical place to look for.
Yeah, and in regards to the GIS, yeah, so it's the Charlottesville GIS viewer, right? So there's the environmental tab, and there's some floodplain information there, some hydrography, topography. That would be cool to potentially, put that as a layer in that GIS viewer, because I would say kind of more people are using that on a day-to-day basis for assessment information and stuff like that. So it would be a cool thing to kind of really pop on the actual viewer itself, if it's not too difficult.
Thanks. These are all very good suggestions. So we'll work on that. I would like to move this packet of trees forward. And so for that, I would entertain a motion to approve submittal of these 6 trees presented to you for preservation to City Council. Paul moves. Second.
Second it.
Peggy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
So the next step is we have to go with this, just a cover letter explaining a little bit to City Council, just giving them a summary, since it's a rather extensive package, and that'll go out this week. And I'm not sure about the timing. Mike would know this better. I know that they were taking these up on a quarterly basis, just like applications for board openings, but I'm not sure if March 15th meeting coming up is their quarterly, and this is going to get pushed to the next, but anyway, it will be submitted to council, and that the next step will be for them to vote on it.
Hey, Brian, just one quick note, because this is what I was going to chime in with before the vote. based on the sycamore and based on your comment that these trees are not simply notable trees in the most public areas, but that we're trying to actively expand the number of them, prefacing the remarks to council in a way that makes that really clear, that they're, these are not just the few notable picturesque trees. Some of them are just great specimens that are part of the city that we're trying to protect, would be useful. I kind of felt with the sycamore report, it was the one part of Mike's comments when I thought it was given a poor location rating because it was on a trail near the river. And I sort of feel like if that nomination becomes part of the public record, it would make sense to say that that's actually, I would argue that that's a good thing, that it's right on the river trail. So those are sort of two related points in how to, introduce this to council. One, that it's an expanded list and not just most public places, and two, that we might consider that sycamore as being, fully relevant and a good location.
Yeah, the majority of the trees were nominated as specimen trees. So to highlight that, I mean, because there are three categories, right? I mean, there's historical, there's specimen, and there's
right.
there's a third. So most of these trees have been nominated as specimen trees. So
there's also memorial trees and street trees. Just
memorial street, yes. The street trees are the ones I always forget. Memorial, historic, and specimen, and street. So highlighting that and making it clear, and also I think just communicating to council at some point that these aren't the only 6 or 7 trees, that there are certainly, we're looking for others. There are definitely others, and we will be nominating others.
No, Brian.
I want to just stop for a minute because I do this to Mike every time. So we are 9 minutes left in committee reports and we have a lot to say. So I want to jump forward and just ask Mike. He's been allotted 20 minutes for his items. Is that sufficient, Mike, for you to report on those two?
Yeah, I could probably do it in 15.
Okay. So we're going to honor that this time because Mike always gets shortchanged. So I don't want to cut off the discussion too much on this, but I did want to give codes and practices. They have some things to say. So I cut you off, Peggy. So was there one more thing to add?
I just want to say quickly, I think there has to be a public hearing. I'm sure not many people will come, but just to note that.
Yes, that's part of the process. So, which all but says that it's not on the agenda at the upcoming meeting, and it may not be on the agenda for a while, but it will make it onto their agenda. I wanted to say more about the follow-on, to go back to Paul's question. We did, at the meeting in November, we did vote on a number of trees on Garrett, and then subsequently we looked at some trees on High Street. So Peggy and I have talked about this, and with the Arbor Committee, we definitely will move forward now that there's significant number of trees that we're going to have to report on, and then Mike's going to have to do his report. So the next batch will be those trees, and we'll move forward on that. Questions about that? Comments? Okay, codes and practices. A number of things there. The first, we've been talking about this the last 2 meetings. We're moving towards hopefully presentations with NDS and Public Works. So is there a report on any progress, conversations, meeting planning for that?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I can speak to some of these, but really want to make sure Paul and Jeff and Mark, all feel welcome to chime in and add information or correct something if I mischaracterize anything. But we've been meeting, as a subcommittee every other week since our last full commission meeting, in part because the April meeting is pretty squarely focused on that with inviting neighborhood development services staff, but also because, Paul's term is ending and he's been such a wealth of knowledge and doing the yeoman's work on this. So we've been trying to collaborate as much as possible while we still can on that. We generated some questions and things we'd like discussion on, and sent that to Mike to send on to NDS. did that pretty quickly after our last commission meeting. Is there anything else to add to that, Paul or Mark or Jeff, before we kind of go on to more of the code update? Or
I guess the one clarification, Mike, is we'd like to have a meeting with NDS and Public Works staff as a subcommittee to review these questions first before next month's meeting, just so that it doesn't become a one-off discussion that sort of they come, they answer some questions, then leave. Ideally, we could have a meeting with them as a subcommittee, answer some pretty pointed questions, and hopefully they could clear up some obvious things that we just have a misunderstanding about. And then we could report back on that next month in April. And then also maybe if they have follow-up comments from our discussion, that they could then have something to follow up on. Is that possible to set up a meeting with some members just to review these questions?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'll have to speak with Missy, and we'll have to figure out which staff is most appropriate for these.
That happened this month.
I hope. I don't know what their schedule looks like, but I don't see why not. We can try. So, but again, it would need to be posted in advance. We have time. Okay.
Just that link that we sent out this morning, you could share with them, that Excel sheet that just has questions. Literally, we're just going to walk through that spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I just want to be clear. Are we on both their calendars for the April meeting? Or
They're expecting an April meeting, but no, they're not aware of another meeting before that with the subcommittee.
okay,
Right.
but just in terms of scheduling, I mean, they will be attending the April meeting, both.
Yes.
Okay. So, and I know everybody's schedule and timing is tight and all that, but I think to Paul's point, it's good to sort of discuss these things before we get into the meeting. So that to the extent that this can happen, I think it would make for a more fruitful and productive discussion all around if we did that.
Hopefully more brief and
could be brief, and we could actually move on to some other topics. I mean, I think that there may be some other things, and as we start talking, as we do at each meeting, we never end early. The tree commission always goes right up until that 7 o'clock hour. So it might introduce opportunity for other discussion with them as well. So I think that's very important. And of course, to state the obvious, Paul is leaving, and so there are some things that would be really helpful if he were part of the conversation. So I know you'll work on it and make that happen. Are there so anything else about the upcoming meeting? If not, code stuff. Code comprehensive plan. I think you're getting, thank you, Jody. You're all getting Jody's, he's keeping us in the loop. If you are not already on the plan together, SIBO plans together, Jody is reminding us and sharing emails with us. I believe there's a steering committee meeting this past Monday.
that's right. Yeah, and that's a good segue, Brian. In terms of, we're working as a committee to assess what the code is and maybe try to identify questions or recommended amendments. But none of that matters unless we, kind of plug that into the ongoing planning work that the city is doing with a team of consultants. And as many of us know, I think all of us know, that includes the affordable housing plan, which was adopted by the city council, I think last month or very recently. It includes the comprehensive plan review and update process. And then the third and final component of that whole big planning process is the zoning ordinance or the code review and rewrite. So, kind of starting there, and then I'll work my way back towards what the committee's working on or thinking about. An updated project timeline was provided at this steering committee meeting on Monday. And while the code review and rewrite was originally scheduled for, I think, beginning in December of last year, 2020, for a variety of reasons, the project schedule has changed. And now the code review and rewrite would begin in April 2022. So, just over a year away. That's a little bit of a surprise, but it still gives us lots of time to be well prepared to provide our kind of recommendations or questions ahead of time. As you'll remember, we also identified the importance of understanding how that code rewrite might happen. You know, if it's going to be potentially a repeal and replace amendment, or if it's going to be a very surgical amendment process, or perhaps somewhere in between. So the method and the format of that will greatly influence how we want to do our work and communicate our work to the city. But there's no real direction on that yet, in part because it's not scheduled to start for quite a while now. In terms of the actual content of what we're looking at and working on, it's starting to come together in a couple different categories. And I know we've got to, you know, save time for the rest of our agenda, but I do want to provide at least some moderate amount of detail so that there's a clear picture. The first category that we're focusing on is standards. As you can imagine, you know, one of that would be incorporating the BMPs into the city's standards and design manual. We're looking closely at standards for tree protection, and also the code language that exists regarding tree removal and replacement requirements. And a lot of that has to do with sort of, you know, we're trying to understand, well, how could we actually achieve better outcomes? How could the code be structured or written differently? And, you know, a different category might be modifying the site plan submittal requirements. So, you know, perhaps establishing a new requirement to have a sheet in the site plans that would show the landscaping plans, but also the tree protection measures and the grading and the utility plans, or some combination of those critical layers put together into one exhibit so that different reviewers can clearly understand, you know, demolition, site works, grading, new construction, planting, and see it all, see how realistic it would work or not work on the initial submittal. And then we're working on kind of improving and providing a better site plan checklist as part of like the site plan process and requirement. Another category that really needs to be looked at and improved would be increasing inspections and enforcement. This is more of an administrative activity. So just writing different language into the code will not matter, but we're just seeing an opportunity for having greater inspections pre-construction in order to evaluate the tree protection practices on site. Inspections post-construction to assess any tree damage for trees that were supposed to be protected and retained. And then if so, you know, initiating the tree replacement process and the inspections and enforcement in between those two times, you know, during construction. We haven't looked at this carefully, but another category would be potentially evaluating the feasibility of increasing penalties and the enforcement of those tree protection you know, practices if they're not followed correctly during construction. So those are kind of the buckets of what we're looking at with some examples of each.
Seems like a very thoughtful way to approach it. It's a good strategy. In that last category, would that include also the possibility of creating a fund as other municipalities have? Is that the idea of penalties and a tree fund? Possibly?
Yeah, we haven't talked about that as a committee too much, but I know that's come up in the commission meetings recently, in the past couple meetings. I think it's a solid idea. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one of the questions on our spreadsheet was just, you know, if there is a penalty and a contractor can't plant those trees, you know, where does that money go? Yeah, and that obviously should go to a tree fund because they're, anyway.
The spreadsheet is just so, I think it's really terrific. And the fact that it cites a chapter and verse for each line item, whether it's BMPs or something else, means that, you know, each item can be tracked through to whether it's enforceable or not. And if it's not enforceable as a, you know, in one category, maybe it moves into the standards and design manual where it is. It's terrific to have everything in one place like that. I really enjoyed reading it.
Yeah.
Great.
No, this is great work. And as we said before, we've got, at least during our tenure, we have one bite at the apple on this. So this groundwork is really important so that when we have the opportunity to submit, we submit. I mean, we should swing for the fences. And it sounds like you all are setting us up to do that. So I look forward to this process. I'm a little disappointed it won't start, the code stuff won't start until April of next year because my term ends March 31st. But I will
Well-
be following it from a distance.
Well, I do think that a lot of the code can be enforced now, and the question is it being enforced, and is it able to be enforced?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Right, we'll swing for the fences, but first we have to have the fences.
Yes.
Just
Well, first you need a baseball and a bat and all those things. But it sounds like you guys are working on the equipment, so that's great. Any other thanks? That's a great, concise, very informative report. A lot of work. Comments, questions, Peggy?
Can I make just a quick comment? I sent it to Tim and Paul. But anyway, talking to the urban forester in Richmond, probably last year, it was, they have a very strict replacement. For public trees, a developer takes them down, they have to replace them inch for inch or pay into a fund. And actually, that's where Richmond gets a lot of their tree planting money, because, so they enforce it pretty strictly. So I think it's something, we should look at enforcement.
And we have actually in our BMPs, those penalties and those fees ready to enforce. We've just never enforced.
Okay, thank you all. We now have Mike's time. One quick point, and then Mike has to go on. Yep, Mark?
It doesn't seem to me that developers have enough incentive to not simply do what they want and then just pay a fine, because the fine doesn't seem to be significant enough to be a deterrent. And I just wondered how that fits into what you guys have been working on.
Well, there's a pretty big deterrent if we want to actually penalize. I mean, a 3-inch caliper tree, cost of a 3-inch caliper tree, and then they're required to plant, if they take it on a big tree, it's like 15 3-inch caliper trees, is the penalty, which, each one's $600, it adds up pretty quick from a penalty standpoint if you want to enforce it. We just haven't enforced it. But
Okay,
that's a
Mike.
BMP, and I'm not sure if BMPs are enforceable. I don't know the actual. That's part of our question, really, with the rest of staff coming up.
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring. I think of places like out of state that have been doing this for a long time, and they end up, these developers, they're there to build the building and make their money. And they would opt to pay into a fund than have to deal with the trees. So I think of places like Montgomery County in Maryland, where they have they do have this sort of system in place, and they have more money than they know what to do with to plant trees, which is great. But I mean, I think what we would find, from our canopy studies that we've done in the past, that a lot of the opportunities for planting are on private property. So if there's a fund for more tree planting on public property, I'm not sure if we're really going to, gain canopy where we need it most, but it's certainly worth exploring.
But if we had a fund that went into a tree planting fund that the city could then give to other organizations that could then plant on private property, such as how Fredericksburg does it, which there's a clear precedent, that could be a model in the future where we are getting trees with these, loss on private property back onto private property through other venues. So there is a precedent.
The folks from Providence who are on this USFS call today plant 500 to 600 trees a year. And that's a public-private partnership. And I don't know how many years they've been at it, but there are certainly plenty of models out there. We've all seen them, so we could pick and choose from among them and come up with something that would work for Charlottesville. I saw 500 to 600 trees and I just about wept. Anyway, Mike, I guarantee you 15 minutes. You're on.
Okay. So I have some bad news about the canopy study. We were expecting I was told by the USDA that we would have leaf-on aerial photography for 2020, and come to find out that I'm not sure, as a result of the pandemic, they did not do a flyover of Virginia with leaf-on last year. So exploring all of our options in 2004, we did the canopy study before. We used a company called GUI Satellite, who took images of Charlottesville with leaf-on and provided us those images to do our canopy study. So I spoke to them. They do have 2020 imagery for Charlottesville, and I'm still waiting to get a price back from them. So I'm still moving forward, trying to get the most recent imagery we can. But if not, the other option is the most recent NIP imagery they have from USDA is 2018. So I was waiting to hear back for a proposal for what it would cost to get it from the satellite company. And so we could weigh out all of our options, but I have not heard back yet. So other than that, the RFQ is, it's about ready to go.
Okay, so that grant that we have to cover the RFP again is 10,000, correct?
Correct.
That's it. So we would need to find somewhere additional money if we had to purchase that data.
Unless we reduce the proposal amount, right? You could use that grant for that portion, right, Mike?
Yeah, we could. The grant is match, but I've also itemized the proposal because I think this is a more robust canopy study than we've ever done. Altogether, we have the possible planting area analysis and things like that. We've never done them all together. So the price is kind of concerning me. So I've set it up so they have to give us line items for each item and then a lump sum. So then, we will need to decide what our priorities are in the study if it does, become excessive.
I think this American Forest tool in future is actually going to help us. I think when we see it, I mean, we don't want that instead of, I'm not arguing to not do this, our own study. I think that might be part of the answer in the future, but for now, so you will let us know and present us options, including costs at some point when you find out.
Yes,
Even if it's before next month's meeting, so we can keep this
absolutely.
moving along. That pandemic, I'll tell you, it gets in the way of everything. So are there any comments or questions on that part of Mike's report? So Mike and I did have a conversation and sort of went through sort of finalized comments on the RFP several weeks ago and agreed that this was the springboard. Once, I know we have a hiccup here, Mike, but once that RFP were issued, then we were turning next to the RFQ, I should say, for the canopy study. We were turning to the mall study RFP, and I've also discussed this with Todd. So can you update us on that? And sort of, I know, we've been talking about this a lot, but now that we're moving forward, how the commission can be involved in this process.
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping to have the the canopy study out to bid, have it off my desk so I can work on the mall tree study. I'm hoping to bring to the commission next month a draft of the mall tree study. Now they've been separated, and it's definitely, I really want to get moving on it. I feel it is a time sensitive issue with some of the trees on the mall.
On that subject, we all saw in the paper online last month. Can you just give us an update on the work that was done? I know it was routine, but.
Sure. So we spent about $19,000 to prune, I believe it was 44 of the trees on the mall. There's 77 large willow oaks, and we were pruning them really for maintenance pruning, so clearing them from buildings, removing hazardous deadwood and things like that. So pretty routine maintenance, but there's some of the trees that have been pruned back that the tops have died, and they're not the best looking trees anymore. So.
Yeah, I noticed some of the skinny ones have gotten even skinnier.
Mhm.
I was walking up there. But were there any issues? I mean, are there any trees that are of concern? Sorry.
We'll know more when they leaf out, but yeah, there's a few trees that are not as robust as others.
And Mike, I know you remember this in the 2015 mall tree report, that one of the recommendations was for crown reduction on the trees on the ends to allow more light into the middle of the trees to sort of sustain the smaller ones. And I know you were hesitant to do any crown reduction, or as you call it, topping, but it's not true topping. It's, crown reduction, opening up light gaps. Have you considered that with any of the proposed pruning?
No, we have not. The things that we've pruned have really, they're clearing buildings and they've been deadwood, really.
Yeah.
So,
but is there a reason why we wouldn't go ahead and do any additional pruning to allow light more into the groves? Is that like a recommendation that the arborist said they wouldn't do, or was?
Jim Urban and I had a lengthy discussion about it, and I asked for some peer-reviewed literature that had where the crown topping had worked. I just looked at the benefits outweigh the risk when you take stressed trees and cut a lot of live growth out. And he was talking about not cutting back the laterals and things. It was traditional topping that I'm familiar with, and I was not comfortable with doing that.
And I think at least my recollection was that it was more about, there's a certain amount of crown you can reduce without, damaging the tree. But if you took out 20% of the crown to allow more light into the center on the edge species, it wasn't true topping. It was really just crown reduction for the sake of allowing light to the middle of the grove to kind of reduce the stress on the interior trees while we don't really have a plan going forward. So I don't know. I would love it if you considered that, if that was a possibility in this process. But
yeah, again, the risks, I felt outweighed the benefits of the pruning Jim Urban described.
Is the level of maintenance that was just done, is that sort of pretty much the same each year in terms of like the effort and the cost? And
yeah, it's pretty much biannual at this point.
So we should walk the mall soon when the leaves are out and get a better sense of how things are looking. We'll get
hopefully we have a mall preservation plan coming up that helps really guide the future of this area.
Yeah. Other comments or questions on this? Like I sort of jumped in there. I listed two items under your report, but you may have other things you want to update us on.
No, that's everything I have.
Okay.
Any update on the mall preservation RFP?
The cultural landscape study?
Well, I thought you separated into two funds. There was a cultural landscape study and there was a mall preservation study.
This is the mall tree study we're talking about. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Is there an update on that was there an RFP going out for that?
This is what we've been discussing. That's what he's working on. Yep.
Yeah, still working on it, but there's not a date for it.
We will we will have it at the next meeting.
Okay.
A draft. So and just to bring everybody up to speed on this, I mean, this is what we had allocated. They had allocated 100,000 for this stuff, which we've been very eager to get done. So it's good to see progress on this. All right, we are now a couple of minutes ahead of time. We will, I don't know who's watching, if we have public comment. We'll start that a couple minutes early. If whoever's keeping an eye on that, do we have any members of the public?
Brian, do you mind if I mention one thing? Just real quick.
Yes, but then let's let the public have a say. Yep.
I know, I slighted Tim when I was talking about 10th and Page. I'm sorry. I forgot to say that Tim lives in 10th and Page and he has agreed to be on the steering committee, not to do all the work, but to be involved and talk to his neighbors. And I just wanted to mention that because Tim is one of our commission members who actually lives in that neighborhood. And I'm sorry I left that out.
Well, that's thoughtful, Peggy, but no problem. No problem.
Okay.
Thanks, Peggy. Any comments from the public? Do we have any comments or questions?
Brian, this is Joe in Communications. How are you doing? I'd be happy to moderate anybody that would be interested in talking to the commission at this time. If any of our attendees would like to address the commission at this time, please click the raise hand icon. Or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. You'll have 3 minutes for comment. I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We have our monthly line item for items, announcements not on the agenda, anything that we didn't take up tonight that, you know, Peggy and I have one, but if anybody else in the commission have something they'd like to address, this is your time. I ran a little hard on people tonight to get us to this point. So if I cut you off on something and you want to speak about it, now's the opportunity. Wow. Are you going to say something, Peggy, or you were just remarking?
Am I supposed to say something or you?
No, it was to the silence. You said, I thought you were remarking that there was silence. There's rarely silence on the tree commission. So I was a little taken aback.
Well, we have one more thing.
Well, yeah. So as we've referenced many times over the months, this is the final meeting for Paul, who has been on the commission for 6 years. And I think most of that time, correct me if I'm wrong, you served as chair. At least for a whole bunch of those years, you were chair. I think you were chair when I came on 5 years ago.
You can just say a whole bunch of years, but it wasn't, I don't think it was the majority. There was some others involved. It's been a while.
Well, at least in my time, Paul was the example of an active, engaged chair. And at one point, he was really due retirement, as was Roxanne. They had served their terms. They went above and beyond. Paul wanted to retire, and he asked me to go for coffee with him at Java, and I knew it was coming. And he asked me, and unfortunately, the timing didn't work for me. And so he and Roxanne graciously agreed to stay on for, I think, another whole term, right? You stayed on for an additional year. At first, it was going to be 6 months. It was a 6-month check-in, and timing still wasn't very good. And I had made a promise to myself that come hell or high water, I would step in if asked, since Paul had extended his term. And so I wasn't surprised when I got an email from Paul that next New Year's Eve. I thought he was inviting me to a party, but it was to remind me that we had a conversation about this. So I just want to say that we have appreciated Paul's efforts through the years. I know it's not going away. It's not a funeral. He'll still be around, but it is sort of the end of an era. He's been on the commission, and we appreciate everything he's done, all of his service. I've joked with him a few times during the year that he's been freed up in the past year. I see him checking his wish list off, things that he might have wanted to work on when he was chair, but he had to coordinate so much. And so lots of energy that had been pent up that he's worked very hard this year. Not that he didn't work hard in the previous years, but that extra effort as he's getting ready to step off the commission is certainly appreciated. I appreciate it. I know Peggy appreciates it. And we all appreciate that hard work. He'll still be watching. He'll still be weighing in. He'll still have ideas and suggestions. He will still continue, even off the commission, I'm sure, to press those issues that are important to him, as he did tonight. Several of the things he spoke about tonight, I know you've been speaking about for several years, and I admire that doggedness and appreciate it. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Peggy for a few words as well.
All right. Well, I talked to Roxanne, Paul's partner in crime, for a long time. And she said that Paul is combination of three wonderful things: knowledge about trees, passion, we all know, and also his ability to sort of be a teacher and teach us all and other people all along. So, you know, it's really going to be hard to replace him, that's for sure. So we have a little gift for Paul, and I'm going to have him open it. That is my grandchildren's wrapping paper. And Paul's going to have to guess. He might not be able to keep it unless he can guess what it's made out of. So.
All right. Let's see what this is made out of. I don't know if I like that pressure there, Peggy.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Brian and I get to keep it if you don't guess.
My God.
Correctly.
Might put it on mute real fast if I. Oh.
Don't look at whoa. No, you can't cheat. You're cheating. Don't look at the bottom.
I was wondering what that tag was on the bottom. I just wanted to see. It is a beautiful and actually exquisite turned bowl. This is amazing.
So what is the wood? He already cheated.
I would have guessed a maple, but I would have been wrong.
No.
Oh no, an ambrosia. What's an ambrosia maple?
Ambrosia, and Mike might correct me, is actually a beetle that gets into the wood and makes all those wonderful swirls.
So
and the other thing is it has what's called a live edge.
Yeah.
The edge there.
Yeah, very nice. This is stunning.
It's a red maple, actually.
Yeah.
Did you say it was a burrow, Peggy?
No, it says on there, I think, ambrosia maple, but the ambrosia is the beetle that's created all that marbling.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
And it was made, it's got JT on it. It was made by Jeremy Thompson, who is an employee at Van Yerry's Tree Company.
Cool.
So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, this is lovely. Thank you very much.
May I say something?
I see Jody's hand is up, so there are other accolades.
Well, I think I'm pretty sure I've been on the tree commission longer than all of you.
Correct.
Including Paul. And I served for a year or two before Paul came, and it was torture, absolute torture to go to a tree commission meeting. The only advantage was that they served pizza. That was it was a chit chat session of minutia, and I know I'm probably offending a lot of people, but when Paul came, he brought professionalism, he brought seriousness and passion to the tree commission, and he brought organization and purpose to it. The tree commit it has changed 180 degrees since Paul has joined, and I can tell with Brian and the rest of you all that is a change that will be here for a long time. But I really attribute it to Paul, and I cannot thank him enough. And he has raised the level of professionalism and awareness of the tree commission and its work in the whole city and with the city council. So thank you, Paul, for all that you've done.
Well, I thank you all. It's definitely, I will pass all credit back to you all. That is, anyway, I'm very flattered. Thank you. This is really special, and it's been a true honor. And I can think of a dozen really terrific projects that everyone has done here already, has been doing, and things that we've done in the past, and we'll keep going. So thanks, Mike, for all of your dedication to this, and and everyone else for future projects. If you do have something that you're kind of interested in, take the initiative and just do it. Yeah, that's my only advice. Just keep at it. But everyone, so honored to anyway work with you all and look forward to seeing you around town. So thanks.
And I think I speak for all of us that we look forward to the time when we can shake your hand, pat you on the back, or give you a hug,
Or plant a tree together. How about that?
plant a tree together.
Oh,
So
one of my favorite memories too, Paul, carrying the tree that Route 20.
That
plant
gateway planting
together
is
with
pretty
you.
special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we get to our free tree program. We get that back and going, and you know that is really, if you haven't planted part of that and been a part of the free tree program that we've done, knocking on doors and asking people if they want a tree in their front yard is really special, and it's a great relationship with cats. So keep that, you know, keep that mission going. As much as we talk about codes and boring things, putting a tree in the ground feels pretty special. So keep it up. All right.
well, with that, we'll end on a high note. The first presentation made via Zoom, for at least for the tree commission. Maybe other city bodies have done this, but we're glad to have had the opportunity to do this. And we are, I don't see any other hands, any comments. We are adjourned 10 minutes early in Paul's honor.
Wow.
We gave you 10 minutes back after 6 years. Well deserved.
Getting a little chilly out here too.
Right.
Well, thank you
Mike, you're
all.
gonna start that meeting, right, Mike? We're good. I don't need to send you a reminder.
All right.
Subcommittee meeting, Mike's gonna check on. If we can add protected trees to the city GIS. Jody asked about adding the master tree list to the tree commission website. Yeah,
I got it.
got it.
Got it. I
That's-
got it, Paul.
That's Paul's last action item list.
Get busy.
He goes out very professional and very businesslike.
All
All right, Paul. Love you, man. See ya. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Paul.
See
Thanks.
y'all.
Bye.